tell your racist stepfather that you held the hand of a black boy. One, consider writing him a letter signing between the comics and the sports section. Do not address it dear father. Just because he still lives in a world of black and white, of no colors, does not mean you have to agree. Does not mean you have to hide the voice, spend hours on each word, writing with black ink and beginning again at least 19 times, and when you finally reach the end, ready to sign the greatest thing you've ever written, tear it up. Take the tiny pieces that say black to his mirror. 2, make him listen to Trayvon's mother screaming. Make him stare at Michael's body from 35 feet away. God knows it was there long enough. Make him tell Tamir's mother that her 12-year-old boy looked like a man in small clothes. Make him listen to Freddie's neck snapping. Make him clean up all of this blood with his own black towel when he says they deserve it, that they're not even human. Remind him that they did not ask to come here. Remind him that people can be uprooted as easily as trees, that the foot of every slave is still bleeding. 3, when he says, that boy's name sounds like a black name, tell him how smart he is because your name is Hebrew and you're the farthest thing from Jewish. You've been a girl named Ariel and she wasn't a mermaid because even Jesus, his savior, is an accent mark away from Mickey. 4, do not make excuses. Do not say it's just how he was raised. It was okay back then because this has never been okay. Because back then, they probably would have killed us. Now, they just think about killing us. We're only holding hands, only drinking the same water, only going to prom in a black dress and white tux, only getting married, not ruining the bloodline, only having babies, not making half-black monsters. We're only loving, and last time we checked, we all had a right to do that. 5, decide you will sit him down. Decide you will tell him no matter how loud he screams, decide the boy is too beautiful to be a secret. Decide you will do it today. 6, say I can't stop writing poems about him. His name has turned to the only word in my vocabulary. Every time I write, I can feel his hand in mine. Say it's been 4 years and I've never stopped thinking about him. It's been 4 years and it still feels the same. It's been 4 years, but now I mean it. And when I jokingly texted him, hey, good looking, that one time I wasn't laughing. I couldn't write this a better beginning. Say he's not afraid of my feelings, and I've never found that. He is not afraid to feel, and I don't want to hurt him. See, everyone who's ever met him has loved him. Everyone who's ever loved him meant it. Everyone who's ever seen him knows what I mean. With your voice trembling, hands shaking, stare your stepfather in the eye and say, he is the only one who makes me not afraid of what you're about to say.
Thank you, Hannah. That was amazing. Welcome, everybody. I'm Deborah Holman, headmaster of Brookline High School. It's so nice to see such a large group here tonight. This is really a special evening. Thanks to the parents, our wonderful parents and faculty members who put together this evening's event. As you probably know, today, during the day, was our second annual Day of Courage at Brookline High School. It's a very special event at BHS where we get to know each other better. We all learn from our peers, both students and adults. We hear voices that make us think, and today proved to be just that for students and faculty and administrators alike. I told the students this morning in introducing the day that there's really an urgency to this day. Our nation is on fire, I too often say these days, and our town is in tumult, racially and as a community. We as Brookline High School, I said to the students and faculty, we as a Brookline High School community are called upon to be better. I referred to a letter that I wrote to you, parents, and to faculty and students at the beginning of the year where I quoted and referenced my predecessor, the previous headmaster, where he used to describe Brookline High School as a microcosm of an ideal America. When the diversity and craziness of our nation is going awry, well, Brookline High School has a chance to be the best that it can be and a real microcosm of an ideal community. And I said to the students that we need to be better in this moment in time. Better for ourselves, better than Catholic Memorial, better than Newton North High School. And yet, last week, with some events at Brookline High School, we see again what we already know, which is that we're not perfect, and that we at Brookline High have a lot of work to do in terms of the diversity and understanding of identity and race in our community. We need to be a school where we treat each other well regardless of gender, sexual orientation, race, religion, ethnicity, economic level. And we need to listen to all viewpoints, all viewpoints. I then quoted the Sagamore's editorial from yesterday's paper edition. And the Sagamore did, the editorial staff wrote on conservative and liberal viewpoints getting airtime at Brookline High School. And one of their lines was, the same way that hateful language that often permeates national discussions hurts all of America, entrenched liberal intolerance at the high school hinders the learning of all students. So I said to the students and the faculty that yes, liberal and conservative opinions and everything in between need to be heard at Brookline High. However, we must be a school where we do not and will not tolerate hate. Hate speech, written, spoken, projected, used on social media. The students needed to hear this message today. Hate speech, I said, is never a joke. It is corrosive to the Brookline High community that we seek to build, and we are simply better than that. So I ask the students, as I ask you all tonight, to please open your minds and views today to new ideas and voices. I think for us adults, the task is absolutely enormous. Our task as parents, educators, headmaster, principal, faculty who are here tonight, the adults for the task with the adults in our teenagers' lives, the task for us is enormous, and it's been made more complex in new ways. The question I think for us is how do we, the adults, be together in this challenge in order to steward our young adults and ourselves to that best and better community that we can be. There's an Iowa journalist who was writing on this a couple of months ago, and one of his quotes caught my eye, and I found it inspirational. He asked, does some dialectic time, some mystifying space in history, give society a chance to change? What about now? Tonight, in many ways, and today is our now. And tonight continues that journey. Welcome, and thank you for caring, really, for our students, for our high school leaders, for our school, and for our community, and being here tonight. It means a lot. Thank you.
Representatives from the 21st Century Fund, the BHS PTO, Steps to Success, Brookline Metco, parents, DHS faculty and staff, I was struck by the passion that surfaced immediately, particularly from the people who work with our kids every day. It felt like so much had been on the tips of everyone's tongues, desperate to be voiced. A conversation about race in our community was clearly one that many people in the room had wanted to see happen for some time. So here's where I get to plug the 21st Century Fund. And I'm actually entirely genuine in this. I feel incredibly privileged, and I choose that word deliberately and carefully, that through my association with the 21st Century Fund, I found myself at this table, very far from the most expert of those present, but actually in a position to provide a context and platform and the organizational structure necessary to make those long-needed conversations finally happen. For those who don't know about the 21st Century Fund, I ask you to please find out more. Go to Facebook right now, take out your phones, go to Facebook and like the fund's Facebook page. If you want to do it now, it's fine. If you do it in like 5 minutes, I'm going to be insulted. At the heart of it, the situation I found myself in with this committee speaks directly to what the fund does. Whether in programming, in classes we support, or in events we put on, the fund makes it possible to take something that we would like to see happen in our school, but is outside of the bandwidth of what a public school budget can tackle, and provides the means, context, and manpower to make it a reality. And we are all privileged that our children benefit from the fund's impact on DHS. As Deb mentioned, for the last 2 years, this high school has held the Day of Courage. A number of us on the fund and the PTO wanted to better understand what the Day of Courage was. In the broadest terms, we knew it had something to do with learning as a community to respect each other enough to be able to have courageous conversations around difficult topics, specifically about race. So we also found ourselves wondering why our kids could learn to have these difficult conversations, but we still struggle with them. And we wanted to get in on the action. Tonight, we bring you one component of the Day of Courage, students sharing their personal stories. I hope everyone will join us again for 2 additional events, one on April 4th and one on May 4th. They're all in your programs, and if you liked Facebook, you'll get a reminder. While working on this series of events, I've had many moments of awakening. It's actually really embarrassing how much awakening I clearly needed. I realized that when I tried to look at things from the other person's point of view, I've always equipped that other person with the rational capability and thought processes of an adult. I'm trying now to look through the eyes of young people. How do experiences, whatever their justifications or cause, shape a young person's worldview, his or her sense of himself, his value, and his place in society? When we talk about education and community, rational arguments and justifications don't always matter. Rather, it's critical to understand how situations look and feel to a kid. Well, I'm apparently happy to humiliate myself and be fairly honest in front of you. My children can barely screw up the courage to order ice cream for themselves, which makes the gift that the students in this video have given us, their insight and self-possession, and their willingness to share these stories not only with their peers, but also with a room full of adults, all the more remarkable. I have a confession, more embarrassing than the fact that I've generally failed to look through the eyes of children and teenagers. I'm tempted to generalize this to my generation, but I'll say simply that this is where I was coming from. Discussing modern-day racism with a diverse group of people around the planning table, I began to gain focus around how I had been defining racism and to see the limitations of that definition. I had always thought of racism primarily in terms of individual acts of aggression and meanness perpetrated based on color. While all kinds of individual and interpersonal racism do continue to happen and cannot be ignored, they're just a part of what is understood today by the term racism. I want to offer an alternate definition. David Wellman defines racism as a system of advantage based on race. What follows from that definition is an idea that white people in America benefit from advantages based on skin color that they did not particularly earn. It's not in any way our fault, not something to feel guilty about or accused of, but as much as we might like to think otherwise, this society is not a meritocracy. And the privilege we enjoy as a result of those unearned advantages puts us in debt to others, makes it our responsibility to actively work toward evening out the playing field. And evening out the playing field depends upon understanding the difference between equality and equity. just because things are equal, they are not necessarily equitable. Glenn Singleton, the author of Courageous Conversations About Race, the book which lays out the protocol on which the Brookline High Day of Courage is modeled, points to 4 levels of racism. The first 2, individual and interpersonal, have largely to do with the acts of aggression I referred to above. Brookline Metro Director, Dr. Susie Talukdar, as well as other committee members, introduced me to terms like microaggressions, brief and often unintentional negative slights, insults, and unconscious biases towards people of color which we commit in spite of our better selves. They happen when a student isn't called the N-word, but is told that he or she acts black, when a student is asked to speak on behalf of all Latinos, or when all Asian Americans are assumed to be Chinese or ridiculously smart. These kinds of microaggressions can be much more difficult to define and identify, and as a result, more difficult to address. But there are also systemic and institutional racism, and it is these latter 2 that are perhaps the most relevant in understanding how our school serves its students and whether it is succeeding in providing in an equitable fashion for all of them. Institutional and systemic racism do not place blame on any specific individual, but they do suggest that if we want our schools to treat students equitably, there needs to be some degree of overhaul to a system of which we are all part and which we support whenever we are complacent and don't actively work toward change. I know the worst thing I could do right now is get into politics, but I can't resist. I'm just going to resist, and then I just kept leading right through, so now I've got to say it. The issue of systemic and institutional racism is at the heart of what I found to be the problem with Bernie Sanders' ghetto comment. This is not meant to disparage him as a presidential candidate, but just specifically to the issue. Whatever the numbers say about the proportions of people of various skin colors who live in poverty, or don't, to focus on the issue of poverty is to address the issue of equality, but not equity. Race and class are intersectional categories, but they cannot be blithely interchanged. To do so fails to see the systems that treat Americans in different ways based on skin color, irrespective of economic class. Glenn Singleton shares a chart which stopped me in my tracks when I first saw it. It demonstrates differences in educational success of students based on race within very specific economic groupings. It isolates Black, Latino, Native American, white, and Indian students. First, in families making less than $20,000 a year, and on, with the final grouping being families making more than $200,000 a year. The bar graphs in each of these categories reveal that students of color consistently underperform white students across all financial groups, suggesting that they're not receiving the same things from the American educational system that the white students are, in ways that are tied to skin color, irrespective of class. My hope is that with these 3 events, we can start to gain some insight into how we might work towards dismantling racism, particularly as it plays out in our schools. I know that on a personal level, over the last 4 or 5 months of planning, I have been changed profoundly. I've re-examined things I've said or say, things I've done, decisions I have made. But more unsettling, I've developed a gnawing sense of responsibility when it comes to understanding the problems in our institutions and systems, and to contribute in some way to dismantling them. I probably have less of a clue than ever about what to do as a result, but there is at least a certain sense of progress in seeing through clearer eyes. In addition to the events we've planned, just a few plugs here, Brookline Interactive Group puts on a series called Race Reels. The next is April 7th. It's in the MLK Room with Pizza, starting at 5:45. The movie starts at 6. And I also want to note that while truly engaged in open dialogue is a critical part of our project, we're not equipped tonight to handle that kind of discussion in this space with this many people. And the teachers and parent volunteers who make up our panel are not necessarily accustomed to being interrogated. So we're going to have a process tonight. You all got index cards with your programs. As you watch the student videos, if you have questions, thoughts that you want to share, if you can write them down on the index cards, we'll come and pick them up, and then the panels can respond to your questions. And if you don't have cards, there'll be people in the aisles, just raise a hand and they'll give you a card. The engaged dialogue that everybody can actively participate in. So tonight we'll go with this system, and if you're burning to really talk one-on-one about this, stick around for May 4th.
My Bachnini, or grandfather, put on a pair of shoes for the first time at the age of 18. At 15, he gave himself a last name so he could go to school. My Bachnini is Berber, and his people's tribe, the Tuaregs, originates in Niger. His parents were from the nomadic tribes, so when his family settled in Morocco, they were very poor. Tribal Berbers keep no written records, don't have last names, and are largely illiterate. His parents never learned to read, never wore shoes, but my Bachnini wanted to leave behind his poverty to get an education. He made up a birth date for himself, and when he was 16, he learned to read and write. My Bachnini was the third of 16 children from one mother. My mother's father is a black, Muslim, indigenous tribal man, and her mother is a Moroccan French woman. My mother, at 14, ran away from her father's violence. She left Morocco in a stranger's car and immigrated to the south of France, where I grew up. I was raised in a low-income household with my grandma and my mama. My mom worked 2 jobs and eventually became successful despite her being an impoverished African woman and a single mom. My father did not want a child. He is not part of my story, but his race is. My father is white, and so is my adopted dad, and so is the town of Brookline. I am a mixed-race girl. I walk a tightrope between 2 worlds, the brown poverty of my mother and our family, and the privileged white of my biological father and my adopted dad. Mixed-race girls are often glorified. Being biracial is in style now. We are seen as a fetish, as exotic. The first time an old white guy called me exotic, I was 4. The Mediterranean sun was warm, as was my mother's hand in mine. We sat on the hot cobblestones, legs stretched out, her skin café, my skin café au lait. We were barefoot. An unknown white Frenchman squatted next to us and started talking to my mother. I stared at our reflection in his sunglasses. He spoke in a low voice, then turned to me, leering his yellow teeth. My mother pulled me up, and we walked away. She explained to me that the old white guy said we were exotic, so he wanted to talk to us. I did not realize that by the time I was 10, I would be called exotic so many times, more times than I could count on both my small hands. People often think calling someone exotic is a compliment. It's not. The definition of exotic is not living or growing naturally in a particular area, very different, stranger, unusual. This is applicable to describe plants, food, or animals, and yet white people use it to describe ethnic people. Don't call someone exotic just because you can't figure out what their ethnicity is. I'm not an orchid. I'm not a chinchilla. You wouldn't call someone strange as a compliment. Because I am biracial and I am ambiguously ethnic, there are a wide array of microaggressions that will happen to me. I've been told I look tropical. When I was 12, an adult told me I looked like a mail-order bride. My white aunt called me a savage when I was 6. I've been called Pocahontas so many times, I've lost count. When we lived in France, people always thought we were gypsies and were afraid we would steal their money. In America, there are 2 stereotypes expected for ethnic girls. Either we're submissive, we're a fetish, we're hypersexual and exotic, or ethnic girls are insolent, we're bitchy, loud, and rude. Everybody knows about the sassy ethnic girl. This time of year in New England, I am white passing. This gives me a certain amount of white passing privilege. It means I don't regularly experience blatant hostility for my race, and I can be sure I will be physically safe in regards to my race. This privilege stretches some places, but not all. It means I usually won't be racially profiled or denied an apartment for my appearance. Being white passing is a spectrum. White passing privilege is a spectrum. My privilege is conditional. What I and all white passing people of color need to keep in mind is that yes, the oppression is real. I face discrimination and prejudice for my ethnicity. But oppression is a spectrum. We, as light-skinned people, need to be careful of how much space we're taking up and realize that we still have more privilege than darker-skinned people of color. We need to check our privilege and realize when we're overstepping. I am an ethnic, Muslim, biracial girl, and that means that oppression finds me in nuanced ways. People make assumptions about my race. I've had substitute teachers play guessing games with me to try and guess where I'm from. In elementary school, the white girls would tell me that my hair was gross. They would ask me why I don't brush it, why it's oily, why it's so bushy and ratty. Now I straighten my hair. I have been stifling and pushing down my spirituality my whole life because I know the price of speaking about Islam in Brookline, of being a Muslim girl. I don't go to mosque regularly. My family has taught me everything I need to know about Allah. Allah is whatever I want it to be. It's love, it's my protection. To white girls who think Islam is oppressive to women, the world is oppressive to women. If you tell women how to dress, how to liberate themselves, you are oppressive to women. If you think Islam is inherently oppressive, your feminism is white feminism. It's not intersectional. I can wear a hijab or show my body and still be Muslim.
Hi, my name is Manjo. In America, the land of liberty, democracy, and justice, the legacy of racism still plagues us. This is the land where I feel the most torn between my two identities, Asian and American. What does Asian mean, and what does American mean? The stereotypes and discrimination that pollute our society have baffled me to a state where I can no longer decipher characteristics into one single race, into one single identity. I had my first encounter with racism on one of the most elated days, Halloween. Eggs smashed the windows of my house. Through the yolk and slime, I saw a group of monstrous and odious boys jumping into a car and speeding off. These types of attacks continued against my family once every week. My family told me that white people hate us Indians. I faced hate crimes because of my racial identity at a very early age, and felt that my family was the only one who would ever accept me and protect me. Until recently, I realized that this wasn't true. My parents are immigrants from India. Along with themselves, they brought a luggage full of South Asian social norms. As a child of Indian immigrants, but born and raised in Boston, I was to inevitably fall under the Americanized Indian category. This category was not introduced to me by the white boys who egged my house, but by my own South Asian family. When I asked my mom to not throw an apple core on Route 9, she calls me an American. She still holds on to the common habits in India, where littering is okay, as many of the streets are already made up of slums. When my parents tell me I can't go to an area like Dorchester because there are too many black people there, I know what they mean. It's a stereotype that black people are violent and criminals, and my family embraces this stereotype to enforce unjustified rules. When I challenged my parents on their views on interracial marriage between Indians and African Americans, I encountered their wrath. My South Asian friends who were born and raised in the U.S., like myself, also engage in discriminatory practices against people of different races. They see me as more American and less Indian because I support the constitutionality of interracial marriage, and because of their judgment, I am thrown into a dilemma of what race I belong in, Asian or American. I can't accept the South Asian social norms that I have been brainwashed to follow, and neither can I fit the description of what an Asian is supposed to be. I don't meet up to any of the standards that the model minority myth places on Asians. I don't take advanced math and get straight A's. In fact, I've taken standard math all 4 years of high school and once received a D+ for first quarter in my pre-calculus class. I don't know how to draw henna tattoos. I wear them a lot less than the amount of BHS girls I see wearing henna as a fashion, when henna is actually a tradition. I do feel defensive for my Indian culture when I see cultural appropriation, to stop those who don't have ties to Indian culture and experience. Yet I feel more disconnected to my homeland, America, when defending India's traditions. That's my Asian American experience. I continue to face the dilemma of living in two worlds, two cultures, two societies. Over time, I've come to realize that both parts of my identity, whether Asian or American, have empowered me to challenge the stereotypes and misconceptions associated with each identity, so people like myself can live with a unified identity and embrace both the worlds they experience. Thank you.
I came to Brookline Public Schools when I was in first grade from Boston Public Schools through the METCO program. Being young, I didn't really take notice to the change in the people around me when I got to Brookline. In first grade, I was the only black kid in my class, but I really didn't see the difference between me and the other kids in my class. To me, we were all just kids going to the same school. As I grew older and progressed through school, I started to notice that I was different from the kids around me. It was in sixth grade that I really started to notice that race and ethnic background affects your education. Sixth grade was when we started the grading process in school, and I remember my parents telling me, as a child of color, you have to work twice as hard to get the same recognition in what you do. It was explained to me by upperclassmen that because I was black, that I would be graded differently and my work might not seem of the same quality as my white peers. This was confusing to me, but I didn't let it hold me back. I was motivated to work harder and be a better student because of what I was told. In 7th and 8th grade, Dr. Vick came to talk to the African American and Latino students about African American Latino Scholars Program. The program is focused on working with the black and brown students that are doing exceptionally well in school to put them in higher level classes together in the high school. He talked to us about influential black and brown people and how we should be working hard in school to continue their legacies. I was glad that he came to talk to us and that we were being recognized for our hard work. When I arrived at the high school, I was met with a sea of new faces, but out of all the faces, not that many looked like me. The Scholars Program was something that changed that. I had a lot of honors level courses in my freshman year, and those courses typically didn't have a lot of black and Latino students in them. Dr. Vick took the schedules of the kids in his scholars class and changed them so that we were all in the honors courses together. This made being in higher level classes more comfortable because I could work with other kids that I was familiar with and that looked like me. This clustering aspect of scholars helps the black and brown students to access a network of people that are in their classes and that they are used to working with. Scholars is also a class to learn in as well. In class, we learn about things in African American and Latino history that would not be taught in a normal Eurocentric history class. We learn about influential black and brown people in the history of the U.S., as well as current events relating to our people. We have discussions about how we should go about fixing problems in African American and Latino people deal with in their communities today. Overall, Scholars has helped me as an African American student to connect with the other people at Brookline High who have experienced a similar academic journey. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Komal Wasif, and I'm American Pakistani. People have always assumed things about me, but have never let me talk coming to Brookline High School. I have been given many opportunities to share my voice. I was born in Washington, D.C., not Pakistan. Being born in D.C. is the most American someone can get. We moved to Alabama 2 years later. I attended my preschool in Birmingham. I came in the middle of the semester because my parents still thought I was too young. My entire class was white, and I was the only brown-skinned girl. Speaking two languages at home, Urdu and English, I was far more skilled in both languages and had a big vocabulary which made students drift away from me because they couldn't understand me. Besides that, my classmates never really wanted me there. Whenever I would go to my female classmates and ask if I could play Baby and Mama or Cinderella, they would always say that there wasn't a role available for me. I would always end up reading or playing with dolls with one of the teachers. Moving to Connecticut 2 years later, life changed. I lived in a small town called Hamden. Everyone knew each other. We were the second Pakistani family there. The other Pakistani family were our really close friends. The Hamden community was really open and accepting of other races. I was the most popular kid in my grade. Everyone knew me, and I was friends with everyone. My mother would get my sister and I involved in every activity, and I just kept making friends. My life was perfect there, which made me especially sad when my dad got a job in New York. New York is very diverse. There are people from everywhere in one state. We got an apartment in Riverdale, 10 minutes from the main city. Riverdale was a tiny town with a large Jewish community. I had, again, so many friends in New York. I was also very popular there. Everyone knew me in my grade. The only problem in my town was that all the students of color were friends with one another, but the whiter Jewish kids would isolate themselves from us and make their own clique. I never faced racism in that school, but I did witness self-voluntary segregation. My school was very diverse, but my town wasn't. Most of the students of color came from other towns surrounding Riverdale. There was one other Pakistani family there. We were good family friends with them, but my entire life living in Riverdale, I've never seen a different race. My dad didn't got a job in Boston, Massachusetts. We moved for the final time. Middle school here was hell. Only 10% of my grade were people of color. I didn't even have a teacher of color instead of my 7th grade English teacher, who had her first year with me, but then was fired. She was Indian. There isn't a proven fact why she was fired, but I have a feeling it was because of her race. Because the year after, all the teachers hired were white. She was a role model for me because she understood me. She saw that sometimes I felt isolated, and she would be extra nice to make me feel better at times. Everyone would say that I was her favorite student. She was the only teacher who understood me. At one point in the middle of 7th grade, I told my mother that I didn't like my middle school and wanted to move back to New York. My mother went to my guidance counselor and talked about my issue. My guidance counselor talked to my principal, who decided that I should have someone to talk to. They had a social worker talk to me every Friday during my last class. The guidance counselor told me that the social worker was an aide to the guidance counselor, but later on I learned what was her real job. They made me feel like I had problems with my social skills. She would discuss with me how to talk to other students and treat me like I was really fragile and could break. I was happy that they tried to do something about my issue, but I hated the fact that they made it seem like it was me who had the problem. Starting from 7th grade till the end of 8th grade, I began to miss a lot of days of school. My mother would let me skip class because she knew I didn't want to deal with my classmates anymore, and my teachers at the time. 8th grade wasn't that different. I did make friends, but we all knew that this was temporary, and we wouldn't talk to each other in high school, which is true. I would eat lunch and do projects for school with them, but that was it. We never spent a minute after school together. By 8th grade, my mother and my sister helped me become strong and to become careless about what other people thought. I came out of my shell and began to become careless. I focused more on schoolwork to get ready for high school, which really paid off. My 8th grade graduation day was both the worst and the best day of my life. My family and I were ecstatic that I didn't have to deal with the school anymore. But at the same time, it was kind of sad because we didn't stay for the graduation party to mingle with others, because no one liked us. It was kind of the end of everything. Everything was over. Coming to Brookline High School, I changed a lot. After having a terrible and lonely experience in middle school, I wasn't very strong on my speaking skills. When I got to high school, I was a shy girl in the back of the class, never raising my hand, but always having the answers at the tip of my tongue. This was a huge problem for me because I didn't have any confidence to speak up about what I had to say. My 9th grade history teacher, Mr. Carl, had an idea that there was something holding me back, and that's the reason he encouraged me to speak up all the time. Whenever we had class discussions, he was sure to call on me, and he did the same when we talked about race. Mr. Carl knew I had a story behind me, and he really wanted me to share it. Due to my shyness, Mr. Carl worked very hard on opening me up by giving me various opportunities to speak my mind. I remember one day he came up to me during class and asked for my email. I gave it to him as he was my teacher. And since then, to this day, he always sends me articles, videos, comments, and such so I could voice my opinion. This really helped me think from my side and not just follow what everybody else did. My sister did the same with me. She told me about all the events and all the programs she did in high school, and she encouraged me to join her. This was how I met Miss Leslie and Mr. Cawthorn. Mr. Cawthorn had told my sister to tell me to apply to racial awareness, a ZBAL class for sophomores, to learn more about race and steps the students could take to help fix the issues of race in our community. I was so ecstatic about this class. I remember making a huge disturbance in my history class when I found out about the class because I didn't have a letter personally asking me to apply. My classmates thought I was crazy. Mr. Cawthorn and Miss Leslie taught my class a lot about racial issues in our school, outside so that we could help create solutions for it. I also learned many new terms that I have never heard before. I don't speak much in that class, but I find that class so interesting where I keep on listening to what the teachers educate us about. The school gives us so many opportunities to speak more about race and give our voice, and it would be wrong if all the students at Brookline High School didn't take chances and maybe even create more programs where everyone is equal. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Karima Arciel Guerrero. This speech will be different from any other speech I have recited before, because I am going to be honest. BHS has never been a place to make its students feel uncomfortable, so being honest has never been an option, but today it will have to be one. When teachers and administrators used to ask for my opinions, I felt honored that my opinions were being valued. I love sharing my feelings about the problems I see this school facing, but I am now a senior, and we still don't have any new teachers of color. Our curriculums have stayed the same, and students and faculty still continue to deny that there is a problem here at BHS. I don't intend to sit here and attack anyone, but I do want everyone to understand that privilege exists, and that there are ways you can use that privilege to help those around you. I do not blame a single person in here for having privilege. No one decides who their parents are, what race they will be, what financial situation they're born into, and so on and so forth. But you can decide what you do with what you have. For this, I blame us for not listening to the stories that our peers have to share regarding their personal experiences. And I blame us for not understanding that we do have privilege in everything that we do and say. Live your lives and have great careers because you truly are intelligent and hardworking individuals. But when you make it to the top, which I'm sure plenty of you will, understand that you have a moral obligation to use your privilege in order to even out the playing fields. For all of the students of color out there, understand that I, more than anyone else, know that BHS has its problems, but we can't take light of the education this school is giving us. Take advantage of it and use that education to go out into the world and make things better. Because I assure you that without an education, not too many people will listen to you. So stop taking it for granted. For all of the white people that are tired of losing their spots to affirmative action, I have one thing to tell you. We won't need affirmative action when there's true equality in this country. I want you all to know the truth. A large percentage of this gym does not know that there was a mural in the girls' locker room which depicted a black girl with giant lips playing basketball looking like a savage. That there have been various racist comments and posts on social media sites. That there was an incident on back-to-school night involving students and a police officer, that numerous meetings have been held and officials and administrators concerning racism in VHS, and that there's discrimination going on in the Brookline Police Department as we speak. I don't blame any of you for not knowing about these incidents, but we as a school need to hold ourselves accountable for not creating an environment where we can speak on these issues. We cannot rely on a 30-minute, once-a-quarter T-block to address these issues. If you get anything out of this speech, just understand that every single person has privilege in some way or another. Use that privilege for the better. Students of color, understand that going to school in Brookline gives you more privilege than students who go to school in other towns. Use those advantages to change things for your community. White people, stop thinking that every time a minority shuts you down, it's a bad thing, because we hear your perspectives every day in history and English, so we just want you to listen to ours for once. Don't be offended. Just listen, and you'll see that we are not attacking you. We are simply asking for your help, because with your help, we could do so much more. Think about that the next time we have our class discussions on race or any injustice that affects a member of the BHS population, whether it be a white, black, Hispanic, Asian, or Native American student. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. fought against injustices for all and widespread ignorance. I know it's hard to understand everything that's thrown at you, because even I am still trying to understand my role in society, but we need to start understanding the power and advantages we all possess. And these advantages could be simple things, such as being able to walk, talk, hear, be heard, be acknowledged, having the ability to complain about being forced to attend a 40-minute MLK assembly, which I'm sure many of you did today, being able to eat wherever you want to eat, go wherever you want to go, say what you want to say, live where you want to live, and do what you want to do without a single person judging you or stereotyping you, without someone automatically assuming that you are uneducated, uncultured, loud, lazy, poor, or even undocumented. That is privilege, and as I have said several times, I blame no one for having it, because we all have it in some way or another. But I need everyone in this gym to fully recognize the power they possess and understand that I am not frustrated with any specific individuals, but that I am infuriated by institutions and systems that day in and day out oppress me and tell me that I am lesser than those around me. It amazes me that we, almost 50 years after MLK's assassination, are still fighting, and that we live in a world where equality at times seems like a mere dream. I am only 17 years old, and I've almost lost hope several times, but I can't afford to do that. None of us can. So instead of just dreaming about equality, let's all go out and work towards it, because when we all work together, progress can and will be made. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Hal Treidman. I know what you're probably thinking. What could the white kid possibly say of substance about race? I don't experience racism on a daily basis. I've never had people cross the street because they're scared of me. Never gotten pulled over for driving while black. I've never been called a slur. Thing is, you're right. I'm here today because I'm the other side of the problem. Just by going through my day-to-day life, I benefit from many racist institutions that define our society, from our neighborhoods to our schools to our government. In fact, when I passively benefit from the system of inequality, I am racist. Let me explain. Racism is an ugly American tradition, deeply ingrained in our history and our society. Think about it like swimming in a current in the ocean. You mind your own business and you do your own thing, but the water still sweeps you one way down the beach. In other words, unless white people are making the active choice to fight against it, to swim against the tide of passivity, silence brings the same result as being actively racist. Young black men are 21 times more likely to get shot by police than young white men. The officers that shoot them will likely never face any scrutiny for their actions. As a white person, I am racist when I'm horrified by this slaughter, but I still choose to accept it as the status quo. I don't stand by my feelings, and my silence is my approval. We have presidential candidates that purposefully appeal to white supremacist groups like the KKK, who fired bullets into a crowd of peaceful protesters at a Black Lives Matter event in Minneapolis in November. As a white person, I am racist when I allow my opinions to be dictated by others. When I hide behind the words of blogs, news networks, and schools, I distance myself from the conversations that will define our generation. And racism is pervasive in Brookline, too. Firemen and policemen of color have raised the alarm about blatant racism within town departments. 4 Brookline High School students of color were verbally assaulted by the family of a police officer right outside on Greenough Street. As a white person, I'm racist when I don't demand answers from my guidance counselor or my dean, when I don't protest or demand action from town hall, and when I don't hold my selectmen accountable for their elected responsibilities. I'm racist when I don't ask why only one of the 22 students in my AP Physics class is black. I'm racist when I choose not to see the institutionalized racism all around me, and when I fail to ask hard questions of myself. I have the choice of ignoring racism if I don't want to deal with the harsh and present reality of it. The thing is, regardless of what I do, racism does affect me. I'm white. I'm struggling to understand my own race. I'm trying my best to see my own internal biases and to understand myself and the society that has formed me. So, how does somebody like me, someone born onto the side of the oppressors, truly fight racism? How do I, wrapped in the painfully artificial pureness of white America, which has been muddied and stained with blood for 400 years, see eye to eye with people of all colors? How do I care? I care for people of all races when I educate myself by reading books and articles by different authors of different backgrounds, rather than just the white men that make up most of our English curriculum. I care when I apply the critical thinking skills taught here at Brookline High to society as a whole and recognize patterns of injustice. More importantly, I call out the people and institutions that make it so easy to be silent and uncaring. I care when I vote for candidates that agree with me and hold them accountable for their power. Beyond that, I care when I stand in solidarity with organizations and people who are going against the tide of racism. I stay aware of current events and I get involved with student and town political organization. And there are so many ways to get involved. In Brookline, we have regular town meetings for people that want to voice their opinions that take place at town hall, and we can attend them. At the high school, we have Courageous Conversations, Race Club, the Student Leadership Team, Student Coordinating Committee, and regular homeroom discussions about race. I care when I demand that our school hire more teachers of color. I care when I admonish our town for even thinking about cutting funding for Metco. The idea that our so-called progressive town would even consider cutting Metco due to budget issues is unacceptable. It tells students that we would offer our resources to the children of the predominantly white, wealthy residents of our town, but turn our backs on students of color who need and deserve those resources just as much. I care when I make an honest attempt to expand my comfort zone by having difficult conversations with people of all colors. Look, I don't know what it's like to be black, but I can listen and allow others to share their experiences with me. It helps me walk a little bit in their shoes, to not turn them into the other, but instead to see them as one unique human being. So yes, I am racist when I benefit from institutionalized racism, but I can do something about it. When I choose to care, and when I choose to act, I rise above, and so can we all. Thank you.
How? How do I tell you something you won't forget like the year before? How do I tell you that standing outside in the cold, holding up a Black Lives Matter sign, doesn't take away your white privilege? How do I tell you that just because you can dribble a ball doesn't mean you don't have to go to class? How do I tell you that just because you say you're an ally doesn't mean you get to say all the N-words in Kanye's new album? When asked to speak for this assembly, I wondered, how do I make a speech that ties Martin Luther King's life and Brookline High together? How do I, as a woman of color, a senior at Brookline High School, look out into the crowd of 1,000 people and charge them with a new order of business? There are 150 more days left in the school year, and for each one of those, I challenge you, just as Dr. King did on August 28, 1963. If you see something, say something. Too many times we let ignorant and racist comments go by simply laughing them off, or we play into the stereotype because we feel that there is no hope or real reason to push back. We allow ourselves to be pushed into boxes by media that doesn't depict the true power in our voices. But the time to act is now. The power is yours. MLK himself said, "Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love." So Brookline, today, I challenge you to be the change you want to see in the world. I know firsthand it's easier to talk the talk and fake it rather than walk the walk and make it. But nothing beats a failure but a try. If we say we truly want to change the world, then we have to start in-house. Long gone are the days of being politically correct. We live in a society where everybody wants to sugarcoat the topic of race and equality, but that ends today, right here, right now. There are times where we will have some uncomfortable conversations. Some feelings will be hurt, and not everyone will see eye to eye. But you are never too old or too young to have these conversations. Go out and spread the word. Have these conversations with your families, your peers, your coworkers. Have these conversations in your classrooms, your break rooms, your board meetings. Make Brookline High a true safe space for all. If you want to change, join the group and stand up for what's right. Because my generation has a voice, and we plan to use it.